it's time. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Happy New Year. And we'll get started on January's Power Board meeting, Washington City Power Board meeting. So, first item is the approval of the agenda. Did everybody have a chance to look it over? And are there any questions or comments?
No.
None here.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the agenda today.
Okay.
Second.
Was that Mark seconding? And Andy did the first? So Dick,
Correct.
would you start us on a vote?
Saunders, aye.
And Mark?
Hauser, aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, thank you. And so next item is approval of the minutes. Again, did everyone have a chance to look through those? And are there any comments, questions, concerns with those?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the minutes from 12/3/24 meeting.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay, I think that was Mark that seconded and Dick did the first. Andy, would you start us on a vote?
Yes, Palmer, aye.
And Mark?
Hauser, aye.
And Dick?
Saunders, aye.
Okay, and Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. All righty, well, then we will jump into item number 3, new business, which is a recommendation to the City Council to approve the 2024 Impact Facilities Plan and the 2024 Impact Fee Rates as presented in the Impact Fee Study. I'll turn the time over to Rick.
Okay, thank you. Happy New Year. So this item's basically a follow-up of what we talked about primarily last month. Just to do a quick review. I went back and made some notes. Seems like forever to get some of these things through the process and done. If you notice, this started with the capital facilities plan. You see the date there, April of 2024. So the work on that started back in 23. And so this, just as a reminder, the capital facilities plan includes basically all types of improvements, those related to growth, those not related to growth. And that was approved or accepted by the Power Board in June. And at that meeting, we also, well, let me back up. Oh, don't do that to me. Page is retrying. So it includes a big long list of different projects. The majority is related to new growth, but there are some that are not. So from that, we take the projects that are associated with growth and they create kind of a sub-plan, if you will. It's called the Impact Fee Facilities Plan, which is required by state law that you develop that plan. And that identifies projects related to growth. I just got to be patient and it'll eventually pop up. And what those were, I'm trying to find it here at the end. And again, I can go in more detail if you want, but these are the basic projects that were identified that were growth related, that basically if the system or if no new load came onto the system, we wouldn't have to do these. But as we project out into the future, these projects will be needed to serve that new growth. And so those are the projects that are eligible for impact fee funding or or that you could put into an impact fee study. So once we did that, which we discussed in this body in June and July, and I believe it was in July, I also gave the council a preview of this as well. So then we said this information plus some other financial information to UFS, who then does the impact fee facilities study, which they take the costs for the future. They look at the revenues and expenses, and they give a credit back for costs that would be recovered over a certain period of time from the even new loads. And so just a reminder, impact fees can only be used on new growth related items. You can't do maintenance and those kind of things. The way we are on the electric side of things and most of the utilities, you have to have the infrastructure there before the load gets there, or you have a big problem. And so it's like we're always, from a financial standpoint, in a deficit mode because we're spending it before we get the income. Whereas like a park, you can probably let the development happen and then build the park after you've collected most of the fees. So it's a little bit of a challenge for the, water, power, sewer, those kind of facilities. And this is, UFS in their methodology acknowledge this contribution margins that new customers will pay over the first few years as part of the rate base. And this is basically the same slide deck that we saw last month. This is those same projects kind of put in by year that was incorporated into it. And so they, our basic unit, if you will, that they use is a 100 amp residential service, and everything's kind of based off of that. As a multiplier, a 200 would be twice that much, a 400 would be 4 times, that kind of thing. And so the end result with them putting it through their process and all the calculation was that their recommendation is the residential impact fees should increase at a rate of 9%. The small commercial and the special service, which is like a landscape timer or a booster for like TDS, very small service, those also would increase 9%. The commercial is basically 20%. I think the difference between the 480 and the 208 ends up in just a rounding somewhere in the calculations. They're basically the same amount. And I did ask them to identify a little better of the reason why the difference. And they were able to go back and identify that the usage patterns for the larger commercial changed between 2020 and 2024. And I think the majority of that change is our average demand went down because we had more commercial come in of the smaller varieties. So like our larger loads like Walmart and that didn't have such a dominant effect as you get more smaller customers in there, even though they're considered large commercial, which is basically anything that's 3-phase. So that's the basic explanation. Again, we can go over in more detail if you would like. And then also that we didn't have last month in your packet that Rachel sent out. This is the text version, if you will. The first one is just the slide deck that they kind of pull out the main one. But this has more of the gory details of the calculations of how they did it, and you can actually see the various numbers. I can find it. It was table 5. And so a lot of the calculation comes off of this line item here, which is the average, it's based on the average KW per customer. And like I said, the large commercial, if you compare this same table to the 2020, I think this was like at 79 KW instead of 74. And by going through all the cost numbers, this one went up $2 on average, this one went up 5, and the large commercial went up 53. And so that's why you see that difference between the 9% and the 20%. And so, again, basically the same thing you saw last month. So really two things, and I think we're okay doing it in one motion to include both the impact fee facility study as well as, the impact fee facility plan and the impact fee study together and move those on to council. And again, the plan there is we'd present basically the slide deck on January 22nd in a work session. And then there's, can't remember if it's a 3-week waiting period between that and a public hearing, which sort of probably be the second meeting in February, is where I hope that they would adopt the new impact fees. And then I think there's a 90-day window before they can become effective. So it'd put it effective somewhere around June, July-ish of this year. So one thing that Rachel helped me with, and I don't know if I showed this last time, this we did a comparison of the current impact fees in the county. The good news is even with so this is our current in the far left column, the proposed of what that service size would go to, and these are what currently St. George, Santa Clara, Hurricane, Dixie, and then the overall average. And as you'll see, on the residential, the only one that's a little bit lower is Hurricane, or substantially lower than St. George or Dixie. On the commercial, we're kind of right in the mix. Everybody's relatively close in there. So I don't, every system's different, so their numbers are going to be different, but it's just I think a good check to make sure we're not out of bounds or something, crazy one way or the other. So that just, like I say, gives a little bit of a backdrop of where we compare to other utilities. So I think we're very competitive, and in most cases we're lower and some substantially lower than some of the other utilities in the area. So even with the increases. Sheesh. So any questions, comments, concerns?
I was quite happy to see it. I was nervous when looking at it and thinking with some of the rising costs of construction that we were really going to have to do a very large jump compared to past increases. So I was really kind of excited and glad to see that it was a pretty modest little jump and didn't have to, something that's not really concerning to me.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Mike. Well, going into this, I fully expected it to be in the 25-30% range across the board kind of thing. So I was pleasantly surprised that it came in lower. And I think part of the reason for that is we have, fairly modest improvements that are required because we're starting to approach somewhat of a build out in areas, so we don't have huge capital requirements. And then we do have a reasonable amount of capacity in different areas in the system, which helps keep that overall cost down. So that was my feeling as well. I'm sure those that have, or when we assess those paying it may have a different view, but again, in the overall scheme of things, I think that's pretty modest compared to what we've seen. And, most of our equipment is double what we were 5 years ago. So I was pretty happy with the results.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
No, my only comment is it's really good to see that we're competitive with the other municipalities that are local. So, I mean, if somebody had ground down to the fine details of what it was going to cost for them to have a commercial facility in either our city or one of the neighboring cities, we're not at any disadvantage due to these impact fees.
And like I say, in many cases, we're
actually lower.
At an advantage, so yeah.
No, I don't have any other comments.
Okay. Well, would someone like to make a motion then?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we recommend approval of the 2024 impact fee facilities plan and the UFS impact fee study to the city council.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
Okay, I think Andy seconded. Dick did the first. Mark, would you start us on a vote?
Hauser, aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. Rick, tell us again, when is that going to the workshop? What's the date of that?
January 22nd, so it'll be 2 weeks from tomorrow.
And that's at 4 o'clock, is that
4
correct?
o'clock.
Okay,
And then
thank you.
I'll have UFS do a Zoom meeting, Zoom in, kind of like we did last month for this body, so.
Okay, perfect. Okay, all right, then I think we are on our next item of business. Item number 4 is regular business, our operations and generation update. So again, Rick, give you the time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and anybody that can attend that meeting on the 22nd, I think would be great. And I know it helps if they have questions to have others in the audience. So, most of the rest of the report, I think, should be fairly quick, fairly straightforward. One of our primary focuses has been securing additional resources, particularly in the period of time between 2027, when our current 5-year contract expires, and when we get the 2 natural gas plants online that we approved a couple months ago or last month. And so Jake spent a lot of time putting together what he feels like our needs are. We've reviewed that. We've sent that to UAMPS. We have received one proposal that actually looks pretty good. We've been working back and forth on some clarifications. We hope to get a second one, at least to give us a benchmark. But it worked out an overall average about $80 a megawatt hour, which includes a lot of summer peaking power, as well as some light load, heavy load throughout the year. So I'm hoping by this time next month I can report that we've secured that purchase. Again, it doesn't address all of our summer load needs. There'll still be some purchases we'll need for those narrow hours over the peak. But particularly in the rest of the 8 to 9 months, we'll be, I think, well covered, and would set us up going into some of the EDAM markets that will be required to start next year, where you have to be more resource adequate going into it the day before. So that's part of the motivation, is to make as secure as we can be going into that new market and requirement that we'll be in. Guess on a sad note, Wayne Whitwer, his last day will be next Wednesday on the 15th. He's retiring. So we'll wish him the best. We're going to do a little bit of reorganization within the department, and in the end, actually, we'll end up with a new position. And I think it'll help distribute some of the workload in the department a little better. So took that as an opportunity to restructure a few things. And so anyway, we wish Wayne the best. He's been a great employee, and we'll be scrambling a bit, finding the right people. We'll have basically 3 open positions right now, and we'll do some interviews on Thursday, more or less to fill the position that when Donna retired in October, that it's been a challenge to find people. We've actually made 3 offers and I guess struck out 3 times. So hopefully we'll find somebody Thursday. Our December peak was just a little over 18 megawatts, which was a little bit higher than last year and about the same as it was in 2022. In December, we didn't have any generator runs. They did run them this morning, just on about 40 minutes each, just to kind of exercise them, get them a good heat soak and those kind of things. So they ran well, so that's always good. So when the summer comes up, they're ready to go. And I believe the emissions testing is scheduled for April. We have to do that every 3 years, required by the State Department of Air Quality. So that's scheduled. We'll do that in April, and don't anticipate any issues with staying under what our requirements are. So on our projects, Grapevine Substation, you don't see much going on physically. That's because we're gathering materials and ordering materials and waiting for them to come in. The battery system and relay panels have been awarded, the battery system to SPS and the relay panels to Keystone, a company called Keystone. Those should be here by around the summer. Substation, the steel is out to bid as we speak, and those bids are due back on January 31st. And ICPE is working on a foundation and below grade, basically bid package that we would send out to contractors, have them install that portion, and then our crews are wanting to do the rest of the construction in-house, setting the steel, putting the bus up, doing the relay wiring and stuff like that. So that's our current plan. If workload changes or something, that we can always bid that out and have a contractor help there. On the transmission lines that will feed the new sub at Grapevine, the steel poles were bid in December. We got those bids back on December 31st, and ICPE is evaluating those proposals we got back for not only price, but they have to send in basically their calculations and make sure they meet the needs of the specifications. So hopefully by next month we'll have those awarded as well. And some of the lead times were better than I thought, in the upper 20s, basically from like 26-7 weeks to about 51 weeks, which is actually pretty good, believe it or not. We did get some insulators in yesterday that we ordered a year ago. So, and that actually is about what they told us they'd be. So that wasn't a surprise that they were a year out, but they did come in. So you probably haven't noticed our crews because they're mixed in the middle of the Sunrock crews on the Red Hills Parkway expansion there. just west of the Maverick on exit 10. We took that opportunity to get some conduit in the ground while they were already tearing stuff up in. So we'll do the conduit this year, and in next year's budget, we'll put the cable, which would give us a newer feed over to Canyon Breeze and that little commercial area that's over there. They're currently, the feed to that area is old direct buried cables that are probably 40 plus years old. So it'll be good to get a newer tie back in there. So we were able to successfully directional bore under the Green Springs Road, because that would have been a nightmare to try to open trench across there, if you can imagine what that would have been like. So it's not cheap, but in those applications, it's worth the extra money. The AMI project's moving along. In fact, the 4 of the 6 DCUs are installed, and the other 2 should be done hopefully tomorrow. There's a representative from Aclara here, and hopefully you'll get those talking through our network and back to Aclara, which is hosting the software. And then with any luck, we'd set our first couple meters. We'll use the Gen Plant as the guinea pig for those, and actually hopefully start talking to a couple meters. So that's exciting. And our first main shipment should be here late February, early March, something like that, of about, I think it's 400 or 500 meters. So, and then we'll gradually deploy those, see how it's going, and then once we get confidence that all the software glitches, and you can imagine sharing data between this software to that software to that software, getting those paths all working right can be a challenge. So we're making good progress on the AMI. The GIS upgrade is basically done. Dale, who's down in the Public Works building, and Tyler in our department, they're reviewing the data, or just kind of making sure everything is working right. And then they'll consider it officially live, but it's the bulk of the project's done, probably 95%. There's some training that the consultant needs to do for Dale and Tyler, and then once that's done, we should be off and running on that. Next week, we'll be doing the SCADA system software upgrade. So there's been a lot of upgrades and new software and stuff. So I'm hoping that will go well. The servers are here, and IT department has been working on getting those configured. So we'll be excited about that. And eventually the data between the AMI, the GIS, and the SCADA system will be able to flow back and forth, and hopefully be able to improve response times, because then the crews could see, if you're on call, they could see this particular circuit is opened up and see where the outages are, because the meters will report back, hey, I don't have voltage. And so it'll graphically help them pinpoint where things are at. So that's part of the goal of all these upgrades, is to improve our customer service. Probably towards the end of this month into February, hopefully the crews will be able to get back and finish the underbuild reconductor on Telegraph. They need to go from 300 East to kind of where they're building the Ash Apartments, that segment there. And so that'll complete that project, hopefully before summer. On the solar applications, we had 6 applications in December, which is actually pretty low for December, with kind of an asterisk by it. The Ash Apartments they've elected to put a small solar system on every single apartment. And so there is about 215 systems that will go in with those apartments. So the 6 are, I'm going to kind of call them normal applications, you know, and then we have this big lump that came through. And so that's the first time we've had that kind of request, and I think it'll go all right. But yeah, so between the main meters and the production meters, there's like 425 to 450 meters that will be in that complex. So, and kind of with that, and it'll probably be February, March, we're going to need to at least do some minor revisions to the solar policy because we have a cap of 4 megawatts or 4,000 kilowatts. Pretty much the ash will use up all and then some of what our remaining available balance is on our current 4. I think, what are we, just a little over 3 right now, or so that'll be coming, and I don't anticipate, we may make some minor tweaks to some of the language, but the main one will probably bump that 4 megawatts to 5 or 6 or something like that as a total. So don't have a lot of pictures this month, but the good news is our power costs in November were less than the November before. So you can see the trend. Well, I guess it was higher than the month before, but it's still lower, which leads into results in the PCA continuing being negative, and we're about 1.5 cents. I expect the PCA to maybe drop just a little more or go a little more negative because I'm expecting the December, when we get that bill, will be a little less than this 10.8 cents. And so if it's that, and then after that, you'll come up here and you'll be comparing the current to this column, the 2024. So I expect the PCA to maybe drop one more time, and then it's gonna probably level off and probably wiggle up and down just a little bit, depending on how it compared to these months. So like this one where we were in 5.5 cents in May, that's probably optimistic. So it may go up that month, it may go down a little in other months. So I think it'll stay negative for a while, but the continued downward trend, I think we're just about to where that's gonna kind of bottom out. And this shows the peak load. The purple line is 2024. You can see pretty much every month other than the September of 2022, we were at or above peak load of the previous years. Probably need to drop off a year or two. It's starting to get a busy graph, but and then this is the other one that I show for December. The average usage was about 565 kilowatt hours, which is well in line and actually a little bit less than most years. And we had a pretty mild December, so I don't think people were really heating as much as they were in previous years. Is probably the biggest reason for that little bit difference there. Any questions on that? I mean, outage wise, I think we've done pretty well. Probably shouldn't say things like that, but especially with the wind that's been going on today.
It's blowing pretty good.
I think Caden's on call, or no, it's tomorrow, but hopefully we'll stay together. But yeah, the wind's been crazy today, so yeah, so don't jinx Jordan. And really that's that part of it. I can shift into UAMPS unless you have questions. Okay. The main UAMPS highlights is the Millard County Peaker project was created with a new PMC last month. We were just a little bit over the 85 subscription requirement that was set. They're working on getting that other 15%, but it's moving forward with land negotiations and the transmission study parts and those kind of things. The Power County baseload project was not formed in December. We hope to next week. And a lot of that will depend on, there's one member that's doing, hopefully their approval tonight. So I'll know more tomorrow if that's gonna be a go. UAMPS is also working with other entities. If they don't move forward, that could fill that gap. So, yeah, there was just a couple that took a little longer to get through their approval process. One of the big topics at the December meetings was the scheduling coordinator that will be required when we go into that extended day ahead market or the EDAM market. And so they have picked, UAMPS has who they want to perform those functions and are going into the negotiation parts of the gory details of the contract. So, but that'll start, I think it's a year from April. So it's a pretty short turnaround. And basically, right now we get an hourly bill, and I think it'll shift it to a 5-minute bill. So every 5 minutes will have a slightly different rate, and really complicates scheduling and billing. And so you got every 5 minutes by 50 members by however many 5-minute periods there are in a day. So, so it'll be an interesting transition for us. So I already talked about the wholesale power purchases. If we can secure that, I think we'll breathe a little bit easier. There, like I say, there's still work to do in that area, but we're starting to build on those foundation blocks. On the Central St. George project, probably the biggest need that will affect UAMP's cost is we're at the capacity. There's 2 UAMP substations, the Skyline, which is up by the St. George Water and Power Building, and then the River Sub is at the bottom of the hill over there in St. George, Foremaster. Those are the 2 substations that are owned by UAMPS. And then St. George has one out in Green Valley that has 138 to 69. And so we've worked with the consultant to develop a plan to add more transformer capacity. And we're gonna be, over the next probably 4 to 5 years, buying new transformers, putting them in River, moving some of the old ones in River up to Skyline to try to maximize the assets we currently have. The good news is, from a financial standpoint, is most of the bonds for that current bonds will be paid off. I think it's in 27, early 27. So it'll fit timing wise because we'll have to bond. So it hopefully won't be a big spike in what our costs are. It'll just kind of continue the same payments. So. Nebo's been running well. They've come out of their fall outage, and there were a few water issues with Payson City, who's the supplier of the water for that plant. They've got those worked out now, and so it's running well. One thing to keep your eye on the news, they're expecting a lot of energy-related legislation to go through this upcoming, the 2025 legislation. You've probably all seen Governor Cox's Project Gigawatt and all those, and there's lots of different moving pieces. So the UAMPS, Government and Public Affairs Director, he's working on that. I know Jordan Hess with the city, he keeps his eye on that, but there's apparently affordable housing and energy are the two hot topics for this year. It seems like they pick a theme for the year. You know, last year was, I think, affordable housing and water, and so now it's energy's side of it. So just kind of keep an eye on that, and we'll keep you posted if there's anything that directly affects us that we need to be worried about. Unfortunately, we don't have any more information on the grant for the Uri area. I think it'll still go forward. We're waiting on them to verify if our current wages meet the Bacon-Davis requirements. And it's somewhere back in Washington, D.C. and somebody's desk to tell us that. I don't know that the change in administration is going to help that timeline. So we're just being patient, and when it comes out, we'll proceed with that project. We formed a couple study projects at UAMPS. The Uinta Wind Study, we have a small participation in that. And the Rotatherm, it's a geothermal project by Beaver. So those two study projects were formed, and then in the results of that study process, if they look promising, then we'd bring a power sales contract before you and then the council, just like we did the natural gas project. So there's actually two that were in study. One is Rotatherm, RODATHERM. And then there's one up by Cove Ford as well. It's expanding that existing facility there. Yeah, so we've got our fingers in a lot of different pies, because on some of these projects, there's not a guarantee that they're going to get to the end. So I would guess if they all came through, we'd probably have more resource than we need, but I think that's a better position to try to sell it to somebody than to try to find it. So we've been, I think, appropriately aggressive in keeping our fingers in lots of different ones. The solar one up by Parowan is still, they're still working out some of the transmission issues, so that one's not dead. So there's just, like I say, we've brought different things and talked about different projects that look promising, and then you get 6 months, a year down the road and they don't work out. So it's hard. You can't just pick a horse and just stay on that one. I wish we could, but right now and going into that new market, I think we're going to be in a better position to be a little long than short. I think it'll pay off financially. So, and that's actually, well, the last thing is on the carbon-free project, still trying to close that out. They felt like they were having good progress with DOE to close out the award. The DOE said they were wanting to get that closeout finished before the administration change. And if they can accomplish that, that'll be a big step in getting that all closed out. So there's not a lot of activity other than just finishing up all those little details on the contracts and who owns the assets and what are the assets and those kind of things. So, and I think that's my report on UAMPS. And you had the little summary too. We've tried to send that out that UAMPS has been doing too. So hopefully you can look through that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Are there any questions?
And it's pretty early but you could, the UAMPS member conference will be August 17th through 20th. And I don't know what it's called now. It used to be called Squaw Valley, but you can't say Squaw anymore. So they changed it up by Tahoe, Truckee Donner area. So you could, if you're interested, maybe try to keep those dates open. I don't have really much detail beyond that at this point, but just kind of keep that in mind.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last item is adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Dick did the second. I think that was Mark that did the first. Andy, would you start us on a vote?
Yes, Palmer, aye.
And Dick,
Saunders, aye.
Mark,
Hauser, aye.
and Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. I guess we'll adjourn until, when is our next meeting? February 4th? Okay, so February 4th. And Rick, if you'll thank the crews and everything for everything they did for Christmas lights and decorations, all the setup and everything, we appreciate it, and all their efforts and that stuff.
Okay, we'll do, and I think they're planning on taking those down Thursday.
Okay, well, they looked great this season.
Thank you.
So, okay, thank you, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there today.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thanks,
You
everyone.
too. Okay, take care.
You too.